Right. We all know how divisive and controversial Star Wars has been ever since the Disney acquisition. So let us take a moment and appreciate the fact that Star Wars is back. Star Wars is fucking back. And I could not be more excited to see Favreau and Filoni and the rest of the team, what they're up to next. So let us talk about why exactly I, along with so many others, feel like Star Wars is now truly on the comeback and is looking more exciting than ever. The Mandalorian Season 2. What a terrific piece of entertainment. I mean, this season has been exactly what us Star Wars fans have been wanting for years. So let us dive in, full spoilers on everything, okay? Whether it be Luke Skywalker, Ahsoka, or Grand Admiral fucking Thrawn, I'm gonna break down the season episode by episode, talk about some of the things I like and some of my issues, and then some final thoughts. Here we go. Episode 1. This was directed by Jon Favreau himself, and I have to say that out of all of the episodes, this was the one that for me felt the most cinematic. It was the one that felt the most like an actual film and not an episode of television. From a filmmaking point of view, it solved a lot of my issues with season 1 of The Mandalorian, which was that it never truly felt like a cinematic experience worthy of the big screen, which is fine because it's a TV show. But it's clear to me that they really built on and developed the pre-existing technology, because Tatooine, for one, in this season does look a lot better than it did last time. We got the great Timothy Olyphant as Cobb Vanth, which was some brilliant fan service. The Krayt Dragon was such a brilliant way to bring us back into the season and into the world of Star Wars. And I'd say that the big boss fight sequence at the end may just be the most interestingly directed and executed action sequence of the season, perhaps, or one of anyway. I also think that this was my favorite piece of music in the entire season, maybe. And remember when we all lost our shit when we saw this? Yeah, simpler times, huh? Episode 2, directed by Peyton Reed. Yeah, we all kind of know this was the stupid filler episode that brought a lot of us back to some of the unnecessary stuff we got last season. I mean, my primary issue with season 1 that kept it good, not great for me, was the fact that nothing really happened till the last 2 episodes. Eventful, I think, would be the best way to describe Mando Season 2. Despite the very uneventful nature of this episode, I will say I liked the uneasy atmosphere that was created. I think this in some ways is Star Wars, taking a rather interesting step into something a little more horror. And I like that there are some interesting VFX shots where you look at them and you're like, yeah, Peyton Reed clearly learned this from making the Ant-Man films. Episode 3, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, who has really stepped up her game since last season. This has some of my favorite shots in the entire season. The world building and overall visuals, production design, absolutely amazing. I cannot believe how great Katie Sackhoff looks as Bo-Katan. And let's be honest, guys, she actually looks like she could be Cate Blanchett's sister, which means they need to bring Cate Blanchett in for Satine for the flashbacks, if they do flashbacks in the Obi-Wan show. I will say I think in hindsight, perhaps, that we rated this episode a little bit too high. Purely because aside from the Bo-Katan reveal, not much actually happened, and there weren't any mind-blowing sequences or anything. It was just a really, really good episode, and I look back on it with a lot of fondness. Episode 4, directed by Carl Weathers, who I thought did a terrific job. From a storytelling point of view, this was one of the episodes that didn't introduce us to new characters or anything. It was more of a reunion with some of our favorites from last season. And so because it didn't have that sort of wow factor, I think it allowed me to view it in a more objective lens as opposed to being blinded by fan service. So I was really able to appreciate this episode for what it really was, from first viewing. And I thought it was rather terrific. Brilliant direction, and the most old school style of Star Wars perhaps since the original trilogy. The action sequences were dynamic and fun to watch. We had that tease of Grogu's blood perhaps being used for early iterations of Snoke. And so in terms of the script as well, it did a really lovely job of standing on its own as a fun episode, but also setting up things to come in the future. Something I felt was missing a little bit from the first season. Episode 5, directed by Dave Filoni. Right, this is the big one, alright? Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper into this one because I think there's a lot to discuss in all departments. So first things first, let me talk real quick about some of the issues that I had. There are very few. First up is how Ahsoka looks. I'd say that this is about as close to accurate as you can get in live action. It did throw me off a little bit that the voice wasn't actually Eckstein, but Rosario Dawson does a terrific job with both the dramatic and physical sides of the role. My only issue with the character's look are the big white horn things on her head. It looked weird with Shakti all those years ago in Revenge of the Sith, and I think it still looks a little bit awkward today. It just doesn't have the same effortless flow as it does in animation. It doesn't help either that you can literally see the creases and bends on the foam horns. It makes her look like a really well done Comic-Con costume instead of something from $1 million production. What may have been a little bit more convincing perhaps is to put some green screen style horns or something on her head that could then be further enhanced with CGI and further animated in post so the movement feels less rigid, and it would also be easier for the stunt team. But that's just my opinion. Everything else about the character, pure perfection. I mean, I could not have asked for a better reintroduction to a fan favorite character. My other issue with this episode in particular is the editing. The editing in this episode is noticeably bad. Any editor can tell you that cutting from this wide shot to this other wide shot is just really awkward and absolutely unnecessary. There are so many excessive cuts and angles in almost all the scenes. Let me play you this bit real quick. Look at these cuts. I mean, like, what the hell is going on? It's clear that this particular sequence is inspired by the House of Blue Leaves fight in Kill Bill, which has a similar style of build-up. But that scene works because they cut and yet they really hold on to each shot for maximum tension. They are patient with it, whereas here they have a specific runtime to meet, and just when you are about to grasp a particular shot, they cut and cut and cut, and it's just unnecessary. Might have been better to just have one shot and hold on it for a long time so the burst feels more earned, like this iconic shot from Sanjuro. So now that the flaws are out the way, let's talk about the pros. First off, this is the most fantastical and heightened looking episode of The Mandalorian ever. It's so incredible, actually, to see the range of filmmaking styles on display in this show. We have Dave Filoni giving us something that looks and feels like animation. The compositions, the lighting, the colors are so brilliantly surreal. Some of these shots look like comic book panels. This episode has such a striking visual style that it feels ripped right out of the Clone Wars series. Also, massive respect to the production designer who made this beautiful blend of Eastern architecture with the simple Wild West style town structure. The action sequences, pretty great. I respect and appreciate that they know Ahsoka may not look super flawless, in fully exposed broad daylight. So they actually use the misty forest as an integral part of the opening set piece and film her sequences almost like a horror film where she is the monster picking off the guards one by one. And the final fight is pretty great. The execution is not too bad at all, but what really gets me going is the intercutting between the Ahsoka confrontation and the Mando confrontation, as it's a perfect way of showing the samurai Eastern influences on Star Wars and the Western influences on Star Wars as one harmonious full moment. Just brilliant. It also bodes really well for the upcoming Ahsoka show, and the reveal that Thrawn is still very much around really hit me hard. I've seen a lot of casting choices, with Lars Mikkelsen being at the top of most people's lists for very understandable reasons, but my top two choices are Benedict Cumberbatch or Ralph Fiennes. Episode 6, directed by Robert Rodriguez. What an already iconic but also weird episode of The Mandalorian. The shortest episode, but in many ways the one that packed the most punch. Not only did we get the glorious return of Boba Fett, which was just so satisfying, and I'm so glad they finally made this character truly realize his potential, we also got the return of Ming-Na Wen, who is pure perfection. They need to put her in everything, and by the looks of it, they kind of already have. Rodriguez really brought something interesting to the direction of this episode, especially with those action sequences. I mean, how insane is it that we saw a stormtrooper's helmet shatter? It seems kind of obvious, but at the same time, we've never seen it before, and it's one of those things you never knew you needed in the Star Wars universe. I will say my one criticism of this episode is that it does at times feel like a fan-made film. With such minimal production design or visual flair, it just kind of feels like they went to a nice park somewhere and just shot it there with not much consideration about the actual visual language. Everything taking place during broad daylight doesn't help with the visual dynamism either. I mean, if you look at what was shot in comparison to the credit concept art, I think that version looks just a little bit cooler. But at the same time, I guess it's fair enough that they went easy, otherwise that, plus Boba Fett's return, plus Ming-Na Wen, would have just been way too iconic and the showstopper would have happened too early. So fair enough, it's still a brilliant episode with a terrific rewatchability factor. Episode 7, directed by Rick Famuyiwa. This is in many ways the most complex and character-focused episode of the season. Such measured writing and precise direction. The action was terrific, and any piece of entertainment that does what I like to call a Casino Royale in their chase sequence has my undying respect. I love the choice of location here as well. Unlike the Typhon grasslands, this was a really nice and believable and interesting and dynamic looking jungle. I loved seeing the more positive aspects of the Imperials, only to have that switched on us by the great Richard Brake, who, fun fact, was actually the hard-home version of the Night King. We also got to see, of course, Pedro Pascal with his helmet off in a really suspenseful sequence, and of course Bill Burr. What an actor, what a role. Like many great comedians, he's able to light up the entire room, but also be convincing as a genuine dramatic actor. And in many ways, I think his facial expressions in this scene alone are some of the most powerful acting I've seen on the show. Just really, really great job on this one as well. Episode 8. Also directed by Peyton Reed. Before we get into all of the glorious fan service stuff, let us just quickly talk about the filmmaking, because one of the things I really appreciate about this show and how it's presented is how much attention they give to the people behind the camera. They really are meticulous in their director choices, which is why I'm so intrigued but kind of bored by the choice of Peyton Reed. I think most of us on the internet know that this is a perfectly competent director who's made good work in the past, but when it comes to mainstream blockbuster directors, this ain't no Taika Waititi. This isn't James Gunn, this isn't Zack Snyder. This is a director with almost no personal visual style, and really no iconic trademarks that allow his work to stand out in the way that every other director in this season has been able to pull off. Perhaps that's why Marvel and Star Wars put so much faith in him, because he just kind of shoots the script pretty well. The guy is basically the complete opposite of Rian Johnson in every way. And I've seen a lot of people comment on how blandly directed the finale was. Now, I actually don't mind it at all, because I was so wrapped up in what was happening that, for the first time in a very long time, I kind of just stopped observing the filmmaking, which some could consider an incredible achievement on the director's part, when they're able to do something so incredible that they feel invisible and the work feels invisible. And I would say that there wasn't anything terrible about the way it was made, it was just functional. And sometimes when we go to a Star Wars project, we want a little bit more than just functional. And say what you will about Rian Johnson on The Last Jedi, but from a filmmaker's point of view, this is brilliant, this is brilliant, this is brilliant. We don't really have that in the finale, which is a bit of a shame, but I think it's still my all-time favorite Mandalorian episode, purely because of what goes down. I mean, first things first. This, Marvel, is how you do an all-female team-up. First the boys, and now the Mandalorian have shown us how to do representation in a really satisfying way that isn't attention-seeking. Amazing. Seeing Fennec John Wick her way through the ship alongside Gina Carano and her amazing facial expressions really brought a smile to my face. And as many of you know, I love Game of Thrones, or most of Game of Thrones, with all my heart. And so to see a character played by Pedro Pascal wield a spear and almost get his head pummeled in and not die because he's wearing a helmet is beyond satisfying. And that's what I call true progress. Giancarlo Esposito is as brilliant as you'd expect, and that whole drama with the Darksaber, although a little bit ruined by the Rebels logic, was really fun to watch. But now let us talk about the big one. The big reveal that made everyone lose their minds. Luke Skywalker, who for some reason is a CGI face instead of Sebastian Stan, which would have been a no-brainer, but let's not dwell on that. This is the Luke that fans want. This is the Luke that we wanted to see, and the Luke that wasn't present in The Last Jedi. This is the redemption of Disney Star Wars. This was when many of us realized we are back. This is magic. This is a heart-stopping, time-stopping event, and my reaction, although unfortunately I didn't get to film it, was kind of like this.
The show goes on!
Yes, there are one or two nitpicks and issues, but I think we can all agree as Star Wars fans that this is a moment to remember. It was so well thought out as a parallel to the Rogue One Vader scene. Ludwig Göransson's score. This is everything from the season and every element of the filmmaking process coming together to create movie magic, to create cinema, and I was fucking euphoric. That is how I felt about the finale. That is why I have so much faith in the Star Wars team going forward, and that is why I believe that The Mandalorian Season 2 has in many ways successfully redeemed Star Wars.